On today's program, I interview Canadian comedian Ivan Decker. Ivan Decker is one of Canada's leading young comedians. He has performed stand-up comedy Canada-wide with numerous television and radio appearances, including regular spots on the popular CBC program The Debaters. He's done 3 performances at Just for Laughs in Montreal, multiple TV tapings. I've seen him many times at the Comedy Mix here in Vancouver. He's performing this weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. He's there often. Ivan is instantly likable. He had me laughing my head off within 10 seconds of talking to him. Here's a little clip of me talking with him just before the show. You've been on The Debaters? God, you got to be quick to be on that show.
Yeah, it's such a fun show. I actually just recorded an episode 2 days ago on Sunday.
You know who I have later on this month from CBC is Bob McDonald from Quirks and Quarks.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, isn't he? Like, he's been around for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
how have you not learned everything by now, Bob? 40 years. Come on.
So the big question will be, like, Bob, is the Earth flat?
Yeah, I love that that's coming back around.
Oh, there's millions of flat earthers out now.
Ugh. Get in a plane. Have you never looked out the window of a plane?
No. This is what they're saying, Ivan. They're saying it's the glass itself is curved, so it's warping the horizon.
The airplane window is?
Yeah, it's the window. It's Boeing's in on it, you see.
Oh, Boeing is. Okay. What about Bombardier, huh? Take a Canadian flight.
It's all Illuminati, Ivan.
Yeah. I'm sure the secret is it was in Building 7.
Yeah, that's right. Get with the program. Do the research. Come on.
Jet fuel can't make the Earth round.
He's a funny guy. So once again, support him if you can. Go to the Comedy Mix. Tell him that you're listening to the Russell Scott Show and you just have to see this Ivan Decker guy. It's cheap. It's a great date night. What are your dates going to say? Boy, I had a real horrible time when you took me out to that comedy club. What a shitty night that was. It's not going to happen. It's a guaranteed slam dunk, okay? The Comedy Mix this weekend, Ivan Decker, and right now on the Russell Scott Show, like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Ivan Decker, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Ivan, when people find out you're a comedian for the first time, do they expect you to be funny? Do they put you on the spot, on cue? Are you the dancing bear?
It's weird because on cue, I don't enjoy it. You know, like if they demand it in the moment, that's what costs money. Whereas if I make my way to being funny on my own, if we're all just hanging out, that I find it's fine. I'm very comfortable with that. But it's weird. Once the ask is there, it's kind of like, I don't want to do that.
But you get paid for this, so you're a prostitute of some sort.
Yeah, I suppose. A prostitute of laughs. I make people feel good, but I feel good afterwards. I think that's the difference.
If you can't deal with the pressure of being funny on cue, how do you deal with a heckler?
Yeah, I mean, hecklers are kind of, they're pretty common, I guess. But it's weird, because, like, rarely do you get people straight up yelling intelligible stuff. Like, it's usually just drunk nonsense that doesn't make any sense. So it's like you can't... The whole, like, illusion of the heckler saying something witty and then the comic saying something witty back that was perpetuated by, like, old vaudeville and The Muppet Show doesn't happen nearly as often. It's mostly just, like, people talking loud or, like, a stag-up party just going, like, woo! Like, you're just trying to do jokes and they keep going, woo! In the middle of your setup. And it cuts off the joke, right? You can't build the tension when it keeps getting interrupted. That's the main sort of heckler. But, like, yeah, there are certainly times when someone does decide to clash wits with you, and you gotta put them in your place.
Have you ever lost to a heckler?
Oh, yeah. A long time ago. I had a joke where the punchline was a rhetorical question. It was about growing a mustache, I think. And I was like, "Are you a fireman?" Like, it was like a kid talking to another kid in the joke. I said, "Are you a fireman?" And then someone in the crowd yelled, like with great timing. Are you a comedian? And everybody laughed. It was very funny.
How demoralizing is that for a comedian?
Oh, if that happened now, it would demoralize me, sure. Because it came from a place of malice. Like, you could tell people were laughing because they did not like me, and they were just glad that this person... Like, if somebody yelled that now, because I was bombing, like, I wasn't getting any laughs. I was working a weekend crowd, I was too young, I had not connected well with the audience, and they just did not like me at all. And so, in that situation, I applaud that person that yelled at me, because I would have done the same. You know, if someone's bombing for 15 minutes, there's a certain point at which, like, it's weird how comedians are forced to do a certain amount of time. It's like you go to a club and it's like, they got to do 25 minutes. But if they've been bombing for 10, they're not going to just suddenly start killing for 15 more, you know? It's like after 10, if you haven't got them, you should just leave.
At the Comedy Mix, I noticed they have the red light that goes on.
Yeah.
That's like the hook, isn't it? Don't they just turn on that light when you're bombing?
No, and that's a common misconception, and it's something that I've talked to the club about. Like, I tell them never to give it to me, but it's just for timing. It's just to let you know how much time you've done on stage. Because a lot of comedians don't wear a watch for some reason, and they don't check, they don't bother to know how much time they've done. And so the light is just to tell you, like, okay, you got 5 minutes left, so do your closer or whatever. And sometimes when you headline, your time is variable, so they want to make sure that everybody has paid their bill. Then they give you the light to be like, okay, everybody's settled up, you can close. But it is in view of the audience, right? Like, you've seen it and other people see it, and it is distracting because people think that's what it is, right? They think it's the hook. So you're in the middle of trying to ramp up for your closing joke, and this light comes on, and everybody's like, oh, what does that light mean? Does that mean he's really bad? I think it does. Let's not listen. Let's not listen to his closer.
Every single person sitting on the side row there talks about it when the light goes on at some point, if they're newbies.
Yeah, exactly. The best club for timing-wise, like having a light, so to speak, is there's a club called Rumors in Winnipeg, and their manager there is amazing. And what he does is he just puts up it's like a clock for working in a warehouse. It's just like a giant digital countdown clock, or it just counts up. So it just tells you how much time you've done. So you don't have to worry about like some primitive, because it used to be like back in the day they would just hold a candle up, like it was like, okay, you've done your 10 minutes or whatever. But now we have technology. Just put a clock that counts up, and then it's fantastic.
Now, every comedian gets asked the same question: what's the worst you've ever bombed?
Oh, so many stories.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I've seen you 4 times. Instead of telling me about how you bombed, let's go the other route. The best set you've ever done. Is it like chasing the dragon? You're always wanting that great, great set. And maybe you can never get back to it again. Is that what it's like?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is like that. It's like chasing the dragon. It's a great way to describe it. You're trying to... That's kind of always it. You're trying to find that new best set, right? The new high. And I think the best set I've done, or the one I enjoyed the most, certainly, was I got to open for John Mulaney at the Comedy Festival, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago now in Vancouver. And his crowd was, I think, very similar to my kind of comedic sensibility. And I was relatively unknown. And so, I mean, I still am, but there was no way anybody had heard any of my material before. So it was all fresh. And it just, everything like matched up. Because I had just been on the road too. Like, I think I'd just done like 2 weeks of club sets. So the material's like tight. I've been doing it every night in that order. And I was just not expecting that kind of response because I had never performed for a crowd that big before because it was at the Center for Performing Arts, which is now a church. But back then it was still a venue for live entertainment, and it was full, like packed. I think it was like 1,600 people, maybe more. And they were just so excited about comedy. And yeah, they definitely were not expecting... I didn't think they were expecting an opening act, and I was not expecting them to be so into it, but it was awesome. But then more recently, I got to open for Notaro, and it was a very similar experience, like really, really awesome at the Chan Center. Opening for these big-name acts is so much fun because it's like a crowd that's already very excited about comedy. You know, they paid like $40, so they're jazzed. They're ready to go. And so you don't have to have that first skeptical 5-10 minutes like you'd have at a comedy club where people haven't decided whether or not they're going to have a good time yet.
I'll give you an example. Jeremy Hotz, he did a set on Just for Laughs quite a long time ago, 20 years ago, I think now. And I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but I'd never seen him any funnier than that. However funny he is, he was 5 times funnier that night.
Yeah, sometimes everything just kind of lines up, and you hope that happens when the cameras are rolling. That's the hardest thing about a TV taping is it's only one set. You only get one shot, and anything can happen. The way the crowd connects, the way you connect, the way that you deliver your words, your confidence, everything has to line up. And there are rare occasions when it all lines up well, and it's fantastic, but usually those aren't when you're being recorded. But sometimes you get lucky and you're amazing sets and cameras are rolling at the same time.
I've read on the internet that you were once one of Vancouver's most eligible bachelors. Are you still eligible?
No, I am ineligible, ladies. I have a lovely girlfriend now, but that list was a weird thing to end up on. It was clear that they did not ask my income, and they just assumed it based on the suit jackets I was wearing in my photos. Because literally everybody else on that list was like a millionaire. Like, I think the person who put the list together was like, oh, comedians make a lot of money. I mean, they do eventually, but not with the exception of probably Russell Peters. Nobody else is making millions off of just stand-up. You know, you got to do some kind of TV show, or especially in Canada, like you got to have a show, or you got to host something, or something like that.
Well, you just mentioned Russell Peters. Of course, he's in a lot of hot water for what he said there at the awards show.
The Junos.
Where he said the underage girls looked like a felony waiting to happen.
Yeah, that ad-libbed line.
As a comedian, what's your opinion on Russell Peters and what he did at the Junos?
Well, I mean, I don't it's hard to know who to blame for that. I mean, it's just one of those things where he made a joke. The thing about all these big events, when somebody hosts that, they have writers. They have writers that write them jokes. But he went off script and decided to do something that was not vetted by the writers. It almost seems like it was on purpose. You know, like he had to know that was going to get him into trouble. So maybe it was like he didn't ever want to do the Junos again. And it was like a power move to be like, I don't want to do this. It's more trouble than it's worth. I could go to an arena and make $30 million. Like, this doesn't matter to me. Basically, like, they needed him more than he needs them, right? Because he's the big star that everybody's tuning in to watch. But at the same time, you know, he's a comic known for making off-color remarks, you know? Like, that's his whole thing. He's not a clean-cut, by-the-book, scripted comedian. That's not what he is. So it's weird that they hire him and then get mad when he does what he's always done. That's what he does.
And of course the same thing could be said with Ricky Gervais.
Golden Globe, yeah.
What do you make of this PC culture? This just happened recently with Colin Cowherd at ESPN. He got fired for some whiff of impropriety, you know, even the whiff now, Ivan. it gets you fired.
Yeah, because people don't want to get character assassinated on Twitter, right? If you can incite a mob, because it's unfortunately, when it comes to saying something offensive in the media, you're guilty till proven innocent. And even then, you're usually not. Like, if the Twitterverse decides, the hive mind comes to the conclusion that you are an enemy, you don't even have a chance to explain yourself. It's literally just like, bye, like, see ya. There was that scientist who got, I remember a while ago, he's like a 75-year-old Nobel Prize winning scientist, and he made some comment about women in science, and he was saying, like, you know, you can't have women in the lab because you either fall in love with them or they cry, or like something like that, you know. I'm pretty sure he was trying to make a joke. Even still, it's insensitive, but people were just like, that guy's the worst, without knowing that, like, this guy's been a brilliant scientist for years and years. He's 75, like, he's so old. That, like, at that point, like, when according to his upbringing, like, saying something like that is, like, perfectly acceptable, you know?
Right, like Don Rickles just passed away. You couldn't have a comedian like that now.
No way. No way. I mean, first of all, they'd be killed by the mob, most certainly. But the mob seems a lot less forgiving than they were back then. It's a bit of a weird thing, and you just kind of have to be really careful.
But that's crazy. That's crazy. That brings us back to, like, the 7 words you can't see on television and Lenny Bruce. I mean, and you know what Colin Cowherd said? First thing he said is, I feel for the comedians. It hurts comedy first.
Well, totally. And the thing that I find so odd, and Jon Stewart has a quote about it too, where it's like, comedians are being held to a higher standard than politicians, than elected officials. You know, comedians are, everything they say is being combed over, but like politicians, people just assume they're gonna be garbage people, so they don't attack them. They don't even bother, right? Because nothing happens. And it's just such a weird thing to be like, needing comedians to be these speakers on behalf of the public. And it's like, it's not up to us to alter our material to please the general populace. It's up to the general populace to stop laughing at certain topics. That's all you need. That's all the editing comedians need. You can't just cut it off. If something's funny, comedians they're gonna joke about it, right? They're gonna say a joke that gets laughs. If it gets laughs in a club, people will not stop doing it. So, unfortunately, comedy's not where it starts. Like, it has to be the progression of jokes has to be a symptom of society actually changing first. You can't make comedy be where it starts. You know, like, if everybody just stopped laughing at a certain topic, comedians would not do jokes about it, right? It happens all the time. Vancouver's, notoriously quite a sensitive city politically, and the crowds force you to write jokes that aren't offensive. That's just the way it is. If something doesn't get laughs, there's no way comedians are going to do it. No comedian is going out there bombing just to be like, no, I just want to talk about this thing. They're getting laughs. So if it stops getting laughs, we'll stop talking about it. That's just kind of the way it is. I mean, I don't do offensive material. I talk about my goddamn microwave. But that is the way that I think it should be going. It's so odd that all these critics are trying to make it the reverse. They're trying to make it like, you stop joking about it, then it won't be funny anymore. And it's like, no, like, the best way to make something not funny is to talk about it too much. It's like if you go to a comedy club now and you hear a Trump joke, you're like, ugh, enough already.
But let's take Louis C.K., for example. He can say whatever he wants, and he never gets in trouble for it. Why can some comedians get away with it and some not?
Yeah, it's always weird, too. It's like when I hear, like, you know, probably like 8 years ago when political correctness in comedy was starting to become prevalent, everybody was getting mad, and I'm like, have you listened to hip-hop? Like, popular rap music is the most offensive shit ever being said constantly. So it's the same thing. It's like Eminem. Like, you listen to Eminem and it was like, why? Like, he just says so much horrendous shit. You know, you just go the other way with it. You swing for the fences and you're like, everything I say is going to be horrible. So it's going to be hard for you to pick a specific thing to even get mad about.
I like how you listed off the only white rapper that you know just to level off the playing field. You're PC too.
Well, I mean, I grew up in the suburbs. Come on. I'm not I am the reason Eminem got famous. I'm one of those suburban white kids that was like, oh yeah, I know what that's all about. I like this hippity hop. Now that there's a guy with my face. But it is weird. But the thing is, like, I think the difference with comedy is that it doesn't need censorship because it has all the censorship it needs, which is the crowd. Like, comedy is such a thing that it's not like other art forms because it's like it doesn't need reviews. You don't need to go to a comedy show and then write in the paper the next day about how it went because everybody knows how it went. They were there. Like, it's not a play. It's not even going to be the same twice anyway. It's the only art form that's being reviewed as it happens. If it's not going well, everybody knows, and the comedian's going to change their tune, or they're going to have to, or they're not going to work anymore. So, like, the censorship is already happening. It's coming from the crowd. Like I said before, if you don't get laughs, it's not good. And that's Louis gets laughs. He talks about these topics that he's not supposed to talk about. But if it's getting laughs, you can't really stop him.
They say comedy is born of tragedy. I tend to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the strife or the hardship that made you so funny?
I think I was always a tension diffuser. I'm a middle child, and I came from a divorced parent home. And there was occasionally, before the divorce, there was fighting in my house, and then even after my dad left, my brother would fight with my mom, or my brothers would fight with each other. And anytime I was around that kind of negative energy, I just wanted it to not be there. So I would try to diffuse it through comedy. Once the argument kind of wound down. Like after a fight, there's that hanging rage that's just sitting in the air. I find that to be so uncomfortable. So I was always the sort of tension diffuser. And it was kind of the skill that I developed. And I think maybe that's where my earliest comedy practice came from, was kind of diffusing the tension in those situations.
I used it to get my dad to stop beating me.
Yeah, that works too. In high school too, it's with bullies, it's definitely, they're not gonna pick on you if you can make them laugh. That's a classic, like, where comedians come from. There's a story, and I've read a book about comedy. I think it was in I Killed, which is like a collection of road stories, but it's these two comics are in a parking lot, and they see this kid ride up on his bike, and these three other kids jump on him and beat him up, and they take his bike away, and he just gets up and walks off, and one of the comics is like, we should help him, and the other comic's like, no, he might become a great comedian.
So, Ivan, you're performing at the Comedy the Comedy Wicks? No, you're not.
It's a candle shop / comedy.
That's right. Ivan, you're performing at the Comedy Mix this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, April 13th through the 15th. You're there all the time, so if people don't see you this weekend, I'm sure they can catch you soon enough.
Yeah, but this is kind of a rare opportunity for me to headline a weekend. It doesn't happen often there where I do the full 45-minute set. And I'm trying to do a set that is completely different from my comedy album that I recorded a couple years ago and released last year. So I hope it will be, if I can put it all together. I think I can. So I always feel bad because people come and see me and then I have, some of the same jokes. I want to make sure that it's new enough. But the problem is, I work those jokes in small chunks all over town. So you may see them. You may have seen individual bits, but hey, if you want to see them all in a row, now's your chance. 45
minutes is a long time. How many years of stand-up does it take to have that much material?
Well, my first great hour took me 10 years, but now it's got to take less than that. And then eventually you get to the point where, like, Louis will do it in 1 or 2 years. And so you kind of have to do that now.
But he's considered to be a ridiculous workhorse in this industry.
Yeah, but you sort of have to be. Like, Seinfeld goes the other way with it. It's the classic conversation that's happened so much about, like, do you pay to see the act or do you pay to see the comedian? And, like, Seinfeld does about 40% different when he comes back through a city. And some people say that's not enough. But I don't know, I don't mind it. I like seeing, because he's such a great editor. I like seeing how jokes, like, he'll get everything down to, like, the exact word and timing.
Mark Normand was on the show last week. We talked about this very thing about Seinfeld. Apparently they called him the scientist. He tinkers with every single joke.
Yeah, he'll you know, there's stories of him spending hours in front of a mirror to get a 5-word setup down to 4. If you can get to that laugh faster, you know, that's what's important. I personally think it's better to do that on stage instead of in front of a mirror, but that's just whether or not you can get the stage time. And so it's a tough thing, because my favorite special ever is Bigger and Blacker, Chris Rock's special, and it took him 5 years between his first special and that special. 5 years of touring it, practicing it, doing it in theaters, getting it down, and it's so rock solid. Like, every line, every bit is killer, killer, killer. And so I would rather see that, but then the problem is you kind of have to disappear for 5 years at a time instead of putting out product every year. So from a profitability standpoint, it's not as good. But yeah, it's a hard thing to know what to do. All I know is that I try to have as much new stuff as possible. But I also want it to be good, right? I want the show to be good.
Yeah, that's a great special. It's not the greatest of all time, though. That would be Richard Pryor's Live at the Sunset Strip.
That special? Yeah, it's absolutely, because of its... I'm just talking, the reason why Bigger and Blacker Chris Rock is so good for me is it just spoke to me at a time in my life, you know? Like, it came out right at the time when I was just discovering comedy. Because so much of it is personal. But yeah, if you want to talk, like, influential specials... Pryor Live at the Sunset Strip is absolutely the one, because it had that casual style that a stand-up special, it was more like seeing a comic live than any other special that had been made before that. It was also Pryor, and he was such an influential and amazing comic at the time, and just inspired a generation of comedians and everybody that follows. You know, you look at those anchor points in comedy, and you have to acknowledge them for what they've done and what they've brought about, you know. And as much as Richard Pryor was an amazing comedian, he was also an inspiration. You look at comedians like that in Canada, like the Vancouver comedy scene really wouldn't exist without Brent Butt. Like, he kind of started everything. He's the godfather of Vancouver comedy, because prior to that, there were like a couple of clubs, but there was no open mic scene. There were no comics like working out material as much as they can. It was kind of all Toronto focused, and comedians toured through here, but there wasn't like a scene of comics that lived here and could make a living. But he kind of created that with the Urban Well, and him and Jamie Hutchinson started that place. And, you know, if it wasn't for them, none of us would be here.
Ivan Decker, who is the greatest comedian of all time?
Oh, the GOAT. Greatest of all time. I mean, I don't know. You gotta... Where do you start? Start with Rickles. I mean, he could be. Carson. All these people who started things. You know, I really like... That kind of is a classic sort of greatest thing, but I don't know. I mean, Seinfeld accomplished so much, but I mean, for straight stand-up and work ethic, he's the guy. But then also, like, it's so hard to pick. Pryor. I'm going to say Pryor. He had to be. Like I said, he inspired everybody. But you know, that's not... It's hard because if you want to pick these older comics, unfortunately, we've had the opportunity to see them fall or see that, because eventually you're not going to produce something that's, like you said, like you're going to have that best set ever, and then you're never going to be back there.
But Carlin, save for the last 5 years, got funnier and funnier.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Carlin is up there, you know. I'm looking at his book right now on my shelf.
You know, and I've got to be honest, I don't think Bill Cosby has ever made me laugh.
Cosby was definitely, like I said, an influencer. I mean, obviously barring all the horrible things he did.
Yeah, he was definitely influencing those girls.
But he was interesting in the sense that if you listen to his comedy, he kind of did everything. Like, you know, some comedians are like great storytellers, great impressionists, great sound effects. He kind of had all of that. He had to be great in every category. But, you know, toward the end, it started to falter, like anything. People build their crowd. It's hard to get an honest response once you become super famous. And it's amazing that Louis has maintained his funniness, because, you know, when you're Jerry Seinfeld and you go out to try a new bit, you think there's an audience anywhere that's gonna not laugh, that's gonna like just look at you and be like, no, not as good. People are they're gonna go nuts if you walk out on stage.
Seinfeld himself said that isn't true. He said you've got 2 or 3 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And then if you're bombing, you're bombing.
Yeah, but you're not bombing when you're him. I've seen, you know, famous people drop in at a club and what it does to the crowd. You can say that all you want, but, I mean, compared to me, they're going to get away with a lot more, let's say. Because it's like what I said about opening for John. People immediately, they trust you. There's a trust built in when you are an established comedian. They don't have that skepticism of like, well, I don't know this person. Let's see if they're funny. When you're famous, people are like, this person is funny. Here we go. I'm ready to laugh. And yeah, I've seen people drop in at a club at a night where like it's, you know, a dead crowd, relatively bad. Like Joe Rogan shows up, and all of a sudden everybody's going bananas. They're laughing at setups. They're just excited. There's an electricity that causes people to be that. Now, that being said, on a show where it's just him, I can understand that. That I understand. Like, if you're going to see Jerry Seinfeld live in concert, and they're the only one on the show, yes, you get 5 minutes of bombing, and then you're screwed. People are going to get upset. But if you're on a show, you're trying out material on a show with 10 or 11 other comics, and they're not famous, and you're Louis C.K., like, there's no way you're going to bomb.
So, but they can still bomb. I guess it's relative. To them, they think they're bombing. Of
course, yeah. They just have a different bar of what bombing is. Of course. They have to hold, and that's how you stay good. You know, you have to hold yourself to the highest standard.
Have you ever done a set that you thought was hilarious, but the crowd just wasn't in it? And then perhaps another comedian came on and wasn't as funny as you, and somehow the crowd worked for him.
Yeah. It's definitely happened, I think. Just certain crowds are into a certain style. Because, you know, my style is, like, quite juvenile. And so I've seen comedians...
I don't even think you swear, Ivan.
I will, but, I mean, I don't lean on it. But it's definitely not something that I try to avoid it. But I think that it's definitely happened in sort of that circumstance where the crowd just, they don't buy into me. They don't like it. They want somebody more kind of rough and tumble. And that's definitely happened. And then also, like, I've had shows where I thought I did well, and then, like, I got a bad review from a newspaper or something like that, or a blogger these days.
We only got another 10 minutes here. Thank you so much for your time. Joke theft. And, you know, Amy Schumer's getting slammed for it.
Of course.
Rightly or wrongly, I don't know. What do you think? Is she stealing jokes?
I mean, some of it. I just had a conversation last night with Graham Clark about it. I really think that a lot of it is parallel thought. You know, it's one of those things. It's a real kind of beautiful mind thing. If you think you're looking for a code, these parallels are going to pop up in your mind, right? But then there are other ones like the Zach Galifianakis bit, and she even said, like, I love Zach Galifianakis, and he's great. So there's no way she could have not seen the bit, and it's where he says, like, I'm very well read. Like, he says it wrong. And she does, like, straight up word for word lift of that. Like, if it's the same idea, it's fine. Like, when people say, like, oh, balls are gross. Like, there's a joke about, like, how balls are gross, and then she does a joke about, like, ball sacks are gross. I'm like, well, I've heard that joke hundreds of times in comedy clubs. Like, it's just not an original concept. But when something like that comes along, to me, it's all about the word choice. If you got too many words in a row that are the exact same as another comic, then I'm skeptical. I'm suspicious of theft. If it's just a similar idea, it's not impossible that you would think of that same concept, you know.
What about the Houdini and the Patrice O'Neill bit?
Again, like, that's like I don't know if Patrice O'Neill came up with that idea either, right? That's like, to quote a great man, President Donald Trump, it's locker room talk. That's like a joke you would talk about with your dude friends in gym class. You know, when you're in high school and all those, like, sex moves are going around. So there's a
Cleveland Steamer and
rusty trumpet or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, rusty trombone.
Yeah. So those are all flying around. You know, when it's like a street thing like that, Patrice definitely did it first on TV, which is kind of the rule. That's usually the go-to rule concerning joke theft. It's whoever did it on TV first. Whoever has a recorded version of that bit first, they lay claim to that bit.
Yeah, she's just getting massacred now. And I think they canceled the Barbie movie on her, too.
Did they? Wow.
Well, it's done. Like, they've stopped production on it. But I think they've cited some reasons, but I feel that the real reason is her.
Because of her... I don't know. I don't think the Barbie people would give a shit about joke theft.
No, they wouldn't. They just look at someone's popularity, though.
Yeah, definitely. They think that it could be protested, it could be whatever, you know.
What about Carlos Mencia? He seems to be a more obvious example of joke theft.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing of, and that was it. Like, they canceled his whole thing. Same with the Dane Cook thing. Like, he stole from Louis. But I just found it so odd that, like, Mencia and Dane were, like, raked over the coals, so to speak. Like, they were just, their careers were destroyed. Dane Cook's career was destroyed. But Schumer...
Yeah, she's bulletproof.
She's bulletproof, and I think the reason why is because the people criticizing her are including inadmissible evidence. You know, they're talking about her weight or her gender, which has nothing to do with it. You have to just focus on the joke theft. But everybody's like, guys, you know, whatever. It's like, you're immediately losing credibility because those things have nothing to do with your ability to be a comedian. You know, gender and weight have absolutely no bearing on whether or not somebody's funny. But you're going to bring it in here, and now of course, you just seem like an asshole. But if you were to have an intelligent conversation about it and look at the actual evidence only, like the whole, it's just weird. It's weird when it's people that she's admitted she's fans of. But I don't know what it's like to be that huge. You know, it may not even be her fault. It's like you're so famous. You're a millionaire. You're surrounded by people who are scared to say no to you. She probably even asked people to be like, hey, is that bit similar? Is that too similar? And they're like, no, Amy, you do it. Please tell me I'm great like you. You know, you get surrounded by these sycophants.
Yeah, she's surrounded by sycophants. I could see it. She blocked me on Twitter, though. She's very thin-skinned. I must tell you.
She may not even run her Twitter.
That's possible. I don't. It doesn't seem to be that way, but you're right. Fair enough.
Like, it's such a crazy to think that anybody at that amount of wealth, that kind of a machine for profit, is doing it alone. Like, she's got a team. These people all have teams of people.
Yeah, you're right. Amy Schumer trademark.
Yeah, like, she's a business. There's a team of people working on it. So, like, you know, I could easily see myself in that same, not that I'm ever going to be that famous, but in that.
Why do you say that, Ivan? Like, you've said that a few times. What's the end game here? You just want to be a working comedian going from club to club, or is the goal to get that Netflix special? Is the goal to?
My goal is to host the Tonight Show. Like, I'm aiming absolute top tier, but I don't know.
Do you push for it? Do you push for it every week? You know what I mean?
Of course, everything I do is to get to that point. Everything is to get me to the absolute upper echelon of comedy, and you know.
So why do you say you can't get there? Is the business just that hard?
Well, it's a bit of a lottery, you know. Any day somebody could come along with, it's very similar to me, but has just that extra little whatever, you know. Like, you look at the, difference between Gary Shandling and Seinfeld. Like, they were very similar in delivery, and
Seinfeld's just a bit better looking.
Yeah, or something, you know. He had a bit less of a whiny voice. But they were both very hilarious, and it's just a matter of what path you take and how you get there. So it's very hard to make every decision correctly.
You know who else is really funny that comes to town a lot is Phil Hanley.
Phil's great. He's from here.
He's from here, yeah.
He's so funny.
He is, I know, but it's just like, I swear the comedians that make it sometimes just aren't the funniest people at all. And if people think that that's what comedy's all about, it's not true. You got to go to the clubs. That's what comedy really is.
Absolutely.
And every night you're going to laugh your head off.
Yeah, I wish more people would come out.
It's cheap. It's so cheap. I don't know. For less than $40, you're going to be able to buy your ticket, all the alcohol you can drink during the set, and it's a great time, especially as a date night.
Yeah, I think people maybe are scared of being picked on, but that doesn't really happen anymore as much. Like, you know, people don't, like, outright, like, drag somebody up on stage and be like, look at this fucking loser's hat! Like, it's so weird people think that's gonna happen. But, I also think people get awkward when somebody bombs. Because it is awkward to be in that room. It's very socially uncomfortable when someone isn't funny. And they're, you know, it's like being at a weird, like, sacrifice where this person is up there just trying, and everybody knows they're bombing. They know, we all know, but we're just supposed to pretend it's not happening, and everybody just sits there, like, gritting their teeth, like, when is this gonna be over? But fortunately, usually, it's only 5 minutes. It's not that long.
That is uncomfortable. That's why I don't like going on amateur night.
Yeah. But I like hosting amateur night for that reason, because you come out.
Then you come out and you're the court jester and everybody loves you finally.
Yeah, you got to be like, oh man, that's how long 5 minutes is. Can you believe that was only 5 minutes?
You never make reference to it though.
I sometimes will, but it's weird because audiences are they're fickle. You know, so they'll hate somebody, like actively hate them. I can tell. I can see on their face they don't like what's going on. But then I'll come out and be like, yeah, I agree. That was not fun. And they're like, hey, be nice. And I'm like, you weren't nice. You were mean for 5 minutes. You just didn't laugh at this person. Now suddenly I come out and make reference to it, and I'm the bad guy. It's weird.
Nothing makes sense in the world of comedy, I'll tell you. And one last thing, Bryan Callen's going to come to Vancouver May 4th, which is Star Wars Day, to May 6th. I've already bought my tickets. You know, Fighter and the Kid. God, the guy's been on so many sitcoms and stuff. It's a pretty huge performer to be at that comedy mix.
Yeah, he's hilarious too. Like, such a great show. Great with the ladies. So I'm excited to be back emceeing. that weekend. I'm also emceeing for Charlie Demers, who is, in my opinion, one of the funniest comedians in Canada that people are unaware of. A lot of me coming up at the Comedy Mix. Most importantly, this weekend, though.
And before we go, any recommendations on new comedians?
Recommendations? Recos?
Yeah, some recos on up-and-comers, locals.
People to watch in this town, I think, Kevin Banner always...
Saw Kevin Banner 2 weeks ago. He was awesome.
Yeah, he's so funny. Jacob Samuel is another guy who I really enjoy. Very funny. Smart comedy, like he sells cartoons to the New Yorker as well. Just really intelligent, great joke writer. And then, of course, your big five, your Graham Clark, your Charlie Demers, your Erica Sigurdsson, your Dino Archie, and who's the fifth? Ivan Decker. That guy's pretty good.
Ivan Decker's great. Ivan, thank you so much for being a guest on the program. It's been a great time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, watch Ivan Decker this weekend or many weekends at the Comedy Mix. Ivan, thanks so much for being a guest on the program.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.